Hey everybody, my name is Molaison. I'll be reading the first 2 pages of my story, Flight Pattern of Birds, which was featured alongside so many really excellent pieces in Witness Magazine's Spring of 2023 edition. Capture myopathy is death that occurs when wild animals are captured and translocated, I tell my therapist during my first visit. He is a mousy white man with a pinched nose and glasses too big for his face. It is singularly the result of fear and stress, I say. You think about this a lot, he asks. He specializes in anger management. I've seen one of our 3 roe deer die of capture shock. Her limbs splayed uncontrollably, and her neck twisted to her shoulder as if she were trying to behead herself. Her muscles stiffened, and she fell to the floor in forceful convulsions. Death happened in 30 seconds. Dr. Arnold takes a note down in his notebook. I can tell that this is the end of our conversation about capture myopathy. A couple of weeks before this, during our zoo's Christmas break, I sat behind the display glass every morning near a shy hyrax I named Jupiter for the big red spot on her side. To get her used to my scent, I'd hold a leaf eater biscuit in my hand and stay silent for 30 minutes. The other hyraxes in our zoo's Kopji community sunbathed and teased each other, and the children on the other side of the glass watched with enthusiasm and spirited identification. Jupiter hid herself in the gap in the rock slope, only coming out after the zoo's business hours, when neither children nor I were present. It wasn't until the few days leading up to our work holiday that Jupiter ate within a body's length distance from me. And then during the Christmas break, surrounded by the zoo pulsating with caws and howls, Jupiter leaned her wary face into my palm and took a bite of the biscuit. Her eyes were like a baby's. My heart fell and soared at the same time. When the zoo was closed, Jupiter came to me when she wanted bites of the biscuit or pellets, but remained in her rock cave otherwise. There was a softness to her brown eyes that many captured wild animals lack. It was December, winter, but still the humid air curled around us. At the end of my working hours, my khaki would be darkened with sweat, behind my knees, under my arms, and in the middle of my chest. My relationship with Jupiter shattered a few days after the zoo reopened for service. Normally, an intern is stationed outside of the habitat during the 30-minute feeding period to deter children from causing a scene while the process is carried out. Our intern was still out of town for the holiday, though, and a child and her mother were peering into the glass while the mother spotted Jupiter crawling out of her hiding place towards me. She directed her child's attention to Jupiter, and the child screeched and pounded on the glass to catch Jupiter's attention. Jupiter's ears flattened, and her eyes flashed with primal panic. She looked at me in terror and retreated into her hole. I knew immediately that months of progress were wiped out. "Quiet your fucking kid down," I screamed. "How could you be so brainless? Eat shit, you cunt." I screamed and I screamed. We recently installed a new soundproof glass for the exhibit, though, and so they must have only seen my lips shaping profanities instead of heard my words. Still, the vulgarity and anger of my outburst was not professional for a keeper. The family were VIP members of the zoo and complained to all of my superiors. The lady's voice was shrill, and she demanded a formal apology from me to herself and to her daughter. I refused and was required to enroll in the zoo's therapy initiative, a 3-year-old program created after a hurricane, when 6 or 7 of my coworkers quit and FEMA was just throwing money around. Lorraine, my supervisor, had asked me, "How do we get our employees to stay?" She put her head in her hands and smeared pink lipstick all over her cheeks. I told her to find something better to offer than money. So I guess in a way, I created this situation for myself. Well, this first visit is really for us to get to know each other and for me to understand your background and where you come from. "Tell me about your family," Dr. Arnold says, pulling me back into session. I knew this was coming, which is why I started with capture myopathy. "I have a sister, Delilah," I said. "Are you too close?" he asks. "I'm not sure." He takes another note down. Delilah is a lube tech at the Take 5 in the parish, and the way she speaks reminds me of more of a man than any of her other coworkers. I mean that she spits when she talks sometimes, a gesture that feels dated. Her navy blue uniform is too big on her, and the mandala tattoo she has on her shoulder and neck peeks out from beneath her shirt's collar. Last time I brought my car to her to get my air filter replaced, I learned that she had picked up smoking, and that to avoid talking, she'd light another one, and another. Delilah and I are the only family each other has, and we always choose to work during the holidays. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Shana Graham, and this is an excerpt from my essay, Dear Lover, Dear City, that appears in the spring 2023 issue of Witness magazine. Dear Lover, the last Saturday I spent with you, we drank Manhattans made with bourbon I brought over. We ate thin slabs of goat Gouda and Idiazabelle wrapped in delicate white paper that you'd chosen from the market downtown. It was early April 2020. The Seattle night still cold, and we warmed ourselves by the gas fireplace in the home we used to share. The living room now staged with swivel chairs and fluffy rugs, a bowl of fake green apples, and a propped open cookbook on the gleaming kitchen counter. Hand sanitizer and a placard warning potential buyers of COVID home viewing regulations by the front door. Our little dogs, my Dove Bear and your new Milo, chased and tumbled like siblings across the wide wooden floor. Playing house in our own house. You said you liked it this way. No clutter, nothing extra, everything precisely placed. To me, it was both idyllic and eerie, an uncanny valley simulacrum of our lives, so close to real, so close I would have given almost anything to surrender and stay there forever. I knew it was all wrong, that I had left you, this house, a year prior for good reason, that we both knew you were lying when you said you'd never hurt me again. When you said we could go home, maybe even find a way to keep this home. When you said you were clean. But I had decided I needed you, that this encroaching pandemic, this would-be apocalypse, was a sign, my beacon back to where I belonged. And need, perceived or otherwise, is a steadfast soldier for magical thinking. The night ended badly, of course. An argument about money, work, future, but really, who is to blame for this mess we're in, and who is responsible for getting us out? That familiar feeling when the walls, the floor, the ceiling start to hum and crackle with invisible blue lightning like we're inside a bug zapper. Our plates of takeout lasagna and salad half-eaten on the long glass dining table. You grimacing, yelling, I can't remember what, it doesn't matter what, lips flared, teeth bared. Me folding in on myself in the black leather chair, words swallowed deep into my ribs. You storming out to smoke on the back stoop. Me crying in the narrow bathroom downstairs. That mirror framed with sea green tiles where my face always looks so tragic, so pretty even when it's twisted and streaked. Thinking, with a twinge of nostalgia, about all the months and years of nights I'd ended in that bathroom, ended just like that. I walked back into the familiar, not familiar kitchen and stood across from you in a familiar, not familiar pose and said, am I going to have to leave here tonight? Because if I am, I should probably go now before I drink more so I can drive. I wanted you to say no, of course not. I wanted you to say stay, please. Let's make this better. Let's sit and have some wine and the tiramisu I bought for dessert. I wanted you to say, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gotten mad like that. Let me hold you and care for you tonight like I intended, And let's sleep in our big bed in each other's arms and wake to the sun streaming through those long windows and the cloud sweeping by so very fast. And it will be just like the first morning we ever spent here, like the first morning ever. And we will begin again, begin again. I wanted you to say all of these things, even though I knew they were as false as the apples on the kitchen counter and the stage child's room upstairs with its mini guitar and stuffed bear and colorful bedspread. Instead, you looked at me hard. If I say yes, are you going to get mad at me again because you didn't get what you want? I gathered my dog and my booze and my backpack. I walked out the front door. I didn't turn back, fingertips tingling, gulping the cool, dark air like water. Buzzed and steady and glad. My own private cinema. See me climb into my car. See me drive straight and sure down narrow streets, out the silent neighborhood, and back to my shuttered city. The streetlights blink from vacant crossings. The bars all battened down and reverent. On a skyscraper in the distance, windows are lit to form a pixel heart, pulsing, bright and dark, bright and dark. I'm the only one in the world on a Saturday night. I am leaving. I am leaving. This time, I'm really leaving.
My name is Konstantin Kulakov, and I'll be reading Take Me to Peacock Alley. Take me to Peacock Alley. The waiters whisk away the butter knife with the speed of a hummingbird's wing. The walls are viridian. No shadows fall from the windows. A dragon enters the room. Smoke hisses from his nipples. Somebody put a fish hook into his heart, and I think it is me. Please, yellow bird, don't shit on the beautiful oyster display. Don't take away my hate. I want to fall. I want to fall into the butteriness of things. God has a plan, but I think his Palm Pilot sank to the bottom of the pool. What are the numbers of love? I want to find them. I want the dragon to dance with me. I want the waiters to be paid as much as me. 3, 3, 3. The blue door says 333. It is 2004. Moscow Cafe. I see sad eyes. Hepburn cigarette holder. The girl is not a girl, but a computer. Her pupils are tomato red, and her legs are viridian. They are a garden, and Grandma is tending it. I want sweet boredom. I want sweet boredom to engulf me with its cigarette smoke. I want the smoke to heal me in all cancers. I want my parents to believe in Santa Claus, and Santa is the gift. Please stop feeding me rotten movies. They are sweet, but the vomit looks tomato red. The day he died was the day he was born. Sweet little merman came on dry land, viridian seaweed on his ear, on his toe a note. She never loved you if she left when things were bad. The bird cage grows and grows into something. You can see the metal wires hurting, rusting. Stop eating the mashed potatoes of hope. All I want is for the guy to be hope, and that guy is me. We have to go slow. We have to go slow. There is a tortoise in me. My viridian shell hurtles along the floor. I think something scratched me, and I am bleeding tomato red.
Witness Magazine, greetings from Chicago. I just want to say what an honor it is to be featured in the Second Chances issue and to be mentioned in the same breath as these amazing writers. So really excited about that. So what I'd like to do is to read you a little excerpt from my story. It's called The Counterfeit, and it goes something like this. When she first saw Shiku and I at the airport, Marita insisted that we buy me clothes right away, so I stopped looking like a beggar. We took an auto taxi to Walton's, Cochin's best boutique, to pick out a fitting wardrobe for our 3-week stay in India. The shopping bag sat between our feet, spooling out with ribbons and crinkle paper. We almost slammed the raw-boned cow as we came into the roundabout. Our driver barely reacted, tucking a cigarette behind his ear. A mother and daughter on the back of a Vespa stared at me as they blazed past the flat canopy of our tuk-tuk. With a throttle, their bikes shot through the stunted cars. It's a social contract, Marita said slowly as our 3-wheeler came up in an old Morris sedan. Each driver searches for an opening, and then it becomes an algorithm for the group. Marita was studying immunology at the University of Travancore. It was just like her to see this as an experiment at scale rather than third world entropy. When do you leave again, Abir? She asked. Early August. Shiku starts Caltech in late September. Why come at all? She asked with the memorial hardness I feared growing up. I played in her family's garden when we were kids. One time, Marita and I got into trouble for digging a giant foxhole next to the flower beds. Another time, she tripped over a shovel and cut a gash in her foot so deep you could see bone, but she didn't cry. When we emigrated to the United States, I wrote to her every week, but in her letters, she reminded me, that's not your country. Now I was settling into the person she'd become. Her black hair whipped in the rush and the heat. Marita's family were Mongolians who settled in India. Her eyes were half moons, and her wide, high cheekbones and apricot skin were like a rejoinder to central Michigan. Shiku's unwell? She asked as the cab turned up a narrow road, flooding our cabin with evening light. He was better when he did his PhD in the interview in May. Lucid. But last month the shakes got worse, and he became irrational. It was our first time in India since we were children. Our parents started drinking, and Shiku and I raised ourselves while they blamed each other for their miseries. When they needed separate beds, we moved into a livable shed in the backyard. When I graduated college, I brought Shiku to live with me. I'd seen what being alone with Papa and Mummy was doing to him. His senior year of high school, he'd hole up in his room and create rituals around the number 3, closing a door 3 times before he left the room, touching his foot 3 times to the ground when he awoke and went to bed, and controlling his blinks when he talked. They diagnosed everything from schizoid to OCD, I said, remembering the stony lighting of those doctors' offices where they'd make Shiku wait outside while they talked to us. Coming back to India was a course correction. For my family, returning to the homeland was the solution. For me, returning was defeat. The collapse of the well-ordered life I built away from the hot chaos of the subcontinent. Marita's phone buzzed like a trapped bumblebee. Hi, she said as she answered, dropping her voice. I turned away, my chest tightening. I'll call you later, okay? She stuffed the phone away and zipped up her purse. Your parents? I asked weakly. No. Just a guy that I'm in a situation with. Marita's world opened up with that suggestion of a life without me the last 17 years. Sir, you don't mind, sir, the driver said as he drew a slip of paper from under the rear view mirror. I have to get medicine. He coasted the auto taxi to the broken curb and got out. Marita looked at me with a dropped jaw and button eyes. What? I asked. She gazed out at the driver approaching an open-air pharmacy crowded with people. You've changed. She turned back to me. You don't even speak Malayalam anymore. And that accent? You sound like the saloon walla on Gunsmoke. It was true. You're upset, I said. She fished a ribbon out of the shopping bag and twisted it around a finger. No, I mean, leaving is your style, no? And not writing? Maybe I should have left India too. Maybe it would have given some shape to my life instead of this. The driver walked back towards the cab, blowing smoke through his nostrils. And don't expect me to call you Abe. Your name is Abir. The auto rocked as the driver got back in and revved up the engine. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Lister Campbell, and I'm going to be reading from my story, I'll Tell You the Truth. Ellie Gal has 256,000 followers on TikTok. Half her videos are split screen. She points and makes approving faces, while a man on InfoWars or a woman in a sunny kitchen suggests vast conspiracy. The other half star her in close-up, on a patio with the sun falling behind her. The same light I remember from autumn evenings, in that Iowa backyard when it was my grandmother's. She smokes. American spirits or a joint. Silver aspen leaves dangle from her ears. Her voice soothes as she half whispers, confiding. We are all one with love and truth. Divisions are false. We experience what we manifest. If you know, you know. If you're on that frequency. I'm a sovereign citizen. I will never submit. We're cousins via my uncle. For months, I've watched her slip toward the edge. First with long Facebook screeds, and when I didn't engage, with provocative comments on my feed. At first, I preened at these bids for my attention. I've always wanted Ellie to want my attention. We're 4 years apart, close enough that jealousy runs in a loop between us like electrical current. As a kid, I was a smart, ugly kiss-up, while she was a cool, beautiful brat. My grandmother loved me more, but in the end, it was Ellie who'd stayed back in Des Moines, holding her chilly hand when she said her last words. Ellie was the one who married a good-looking lawyer and moved into my grandmother's house. I rode the Greyhound to their wedding from college in Chicago, carrying a silver-wrapped breadboard that had cost me a lot, $31.25. Ellie wore a silvery Vera Wang gown that her bridesmaids and I helped her lift while she peed. At the wedding, I got drunk and afterward puked on my aunt's prize roses. The next morning, I lay in bed, hungover and horny, fantasizing about fucking Ellie's new husband. My own smart boy had left me that fall for no one. He had an idea, he said, of what he wanted in a woman. If he stayed with me, he'd never find it. It's called pneumonia. That's what old people die of. Pneumonia. We have all these supposed deaths, but do we really? People are making themselves sick, bringing that energy to themselves. I'm not on that frequency. Ellie is responding to Nurse Tanya, 99, who watched 500 people die gasping in the past year. The gliding cruelty of Ellie's tone, the superior smirk, taps an old jangling nerve in the center of my body. We're on her bed, 13 and 9. Her friend Rachel is French braiding my hair while Ellie reads her history book. Who cares about Nixon, she says. This is stupid. He did Watergate, I say to impress the older girls. Wow, Jess, you're so smart, Ellie says. Her dark eyes fix on me so I can feel them as I gaze down at the flowered bedspread. So, what is Watergate? Tell us about it. Rachel sighs behind me. Her hands are in my hair, and she can feel the shiver in my neck. Maybe we should get something to eat, she says. Go ahead. What's Watergate? Tell us. Explain it. We're waiting. Freeze. That's what Ellie makes me do. He got impeached, I say finally. My grandmother hated Nixon with a passion she voiced often to me while we tooled around in her ice blue convertible. She never talked to Ellie about serious things. And what's impeached, Jess? Ellie says. You said it. You must know. I pretend to be deaf. Ellie keeps badgering until the tears drip from my chin. I want to run, but if I do, I won't be on Ellie's Laura Ashley bedspread, MTV in the background. The faint trace of the cigarette the girls let me puff on will turn sour in my mouth instead of delicious. Ellie, come on, leave her alone, Rachel says, finally, and gets the can of hairspray. Later, in my own bed, my scalp presses on the painful knob of the braid I won't let my mother take out for days. Are you going to eat breakfast with me or not? My husband asks. I'm still in bed, laptop open, the warm fall light bouncing off Lake Michigan below and filtering in under the half-open shade. It's been a week since I learned of Ellie's semi-stardom from a mutual friend, and I'm mesmerized. Red veins marble through the whites of her eyes. Her pupils are the color of preserving amber, hardened over a struggling insect. Who are these people watching her? I ask for the 100th time. I've never signed in. I don't want to be counted among her followers. Ellie's video from last night plays while I sip coffee. French bistro lights are strung above her. Below, I know, but can't see, is a faded green cement patio, suffused with spidery cracks. I can hear a car going down the steep gravel driveway, where my mother used to park our station wagon when we visited, sometimes late at night. My mother pulled me from my bed and bundled me in the car. I remember her gait as she carried me, sleepy, over the crunching gravel to the hard, high mattress of her own childhood.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Hart Bergstrom, recording this to you from Vermont, and this is my short story, The Selkie at the Laundromat. Daphne felt naked without her sealskin on. She watched it spin around and around in the metal drum of the industrial-size washer. The tumbling pelt, along with her blue jeans, camisoles, socks, and black underwear, went dudum, tss, dudum, tss, like a drum fill, emphasizing a punchline to the joke that was her life. She was wearing human clothes, of course, so as not to cause a scene in the Sparkle Wash laundromat. Her ex's t-shirt, a hoodie, and a pair of jeans, too tight in the hips, were all she had been able to borrow on short notice. It was March in Brooklyn, and she rubbed her hands together to warm them after the raw, cold wind. Outside, every intersection had a gray slush puddle that was deeper than it looked, and the streets were lined with London plane trees that pointed their leafless branches at the sky. Inside, the laundromat chairs were made of molded lime green plastic and were impossible to get comfortable in. But she had to sit there for 2 hours, or else her most prized possession might get stolen. Also, she really liked that pair of socks with kittens wearing bow ties. The 3 TVs bolted to the walls played a loop of depressing crime shows with endless shots of interrogation rooms and coroner's reports and body bags unzipping. It made her stomach turn. The TVs were placed high enough that no one could change the channel or turn down the volume. Fluorescent lights shone unsteadily from the paneled ceiling overhead. The owner was up front listening to music in the booth, and the only other customer was an older man with dreadlocks who was snoring lightly in a chair in the corner. A huge laundry cart sat empty next to him. The tile floor was worn from years of shoes tramping back and forth, and the smell of bleach rose from the corners, where it was still damp from mopping. Daphne's hands had a metallic tang from the quarters she dug up, with permission, From her ex's couch cushions, the bottom of an old backpack, and one she found on the sidewalk stuck to a chewed-up piece of bubblegum. She couldn't afford to be squeamish right now. She had stayed at sea for so long this time that she had almost forgotten how to do laundry. Normally, her sealskin wouldn't be subjected to something so harsh as a washing machine, but 2 weeks ago, she'd gotten caught in an algae bloom that made her sick. Daphne had spent the winter on Ocracoke, a barrier island off the coast of North Carolina, with miles of wild beaches and dune grasses. There, she made friends with wild ponies and watched the long beam of the lighthouse swing over the waves. The village was small and quirky, with shops selling kites, fishing poles, books, tea, seashells, and flowers. She didn't swim too close to town, but when she rested on shore at night, she could hear guitars and banjos from their music hall. The smells of frying fish and chicken floated from houses and restaurants. It was idyllic until the waters grew warm and the algae came. The water was warming up earlier and earlier each spring, and she'd never seen the algae this bad before. When the toxic bloom washed over her, Daphne rushed to shore, peeled off her seal fur, and lay coughing on the sand. She always kept a stash with her driver's license, clothes, phone, and a little cash hidden in a dry bag on shore for when she came back from the sea, but she was too sick to swim as far as her hiding spot. To cover herself, she stole a pair of overalls from a clothesline. She started running a fever and had to hitchhike to the mainland and panhandle for bus fare. During the long bus trip to Penn Station, she shivered and sweated and had delirious dreams. When she arrived in Manhattan, she used a computer at the nearest library to message her ex in Brooklyn. They'd stayed friends after their breakup, and she'd forgotten a few things at his apartment, a change of clothes or two, and her old cell phone and charger. He agreed to let Daphne recuperate on his couch. It was awkward seeing him again, but she had little other choice since she'd fallen out of touch with other friends, and her family lived too far away. She slept off the fever for a week while her ex brought her Gatorade and crackers. Even after multiple showers and baths at his apartment, the noxious algae still clung to her spotted gray-brown pelt. Like everyone she knew in New York, his place was too small for a washer and dryer. So with the sparkle wash, she chose delicate and cold water and hoped for the best. Daphne was average-sized for a harbor seal, but short for a human, about 5 feet tall with a soft roundness to her belly and hips. Although being a Selkie ran in her family, not everyone expressed the gene. This made for awkward family vacations where Daphne darted off swimming for miles, and her sister would sit on the high tide line of the beach, hiding under a sun hat and looking miserable. Her sister didn't trust the ocean. To Daphne, swimming was like breathing, automatic and impossible to live without.
In this version of the story, we stay together, and the children seem happier despite the distance between us. They storm into the bedroom like wild banshees, but we aren't disturbed by their sharp elbows, their cannonballs onto the mattress. Instead, we are happy for the distraction, happy to rest in their bright-eyed glazes, in their embracing of the moment. We drink French press coffee on the weekends, tend to buttermilk pancakes, forget the bacon until it smokes, and wave towels wildly in front of the blaring smoke alarm. Eventually, the ache of lost dreams begins to fade, and we settle into a quiet life of rare sex, short trips to the beach, and the routines of scheduling the kids for soccer games, ballet, summer camp, or driving to see my in-laws at the bay. In the evening, we spread a warm blanket across our distant bodies and watch something on Netflix that has excellent reviews. Sometimes we talk about the show, but often we turn off the television and wander upstairs, idly brush our teeth before slipping into bed, sleeping beneath the whirring fan. In this version of the story, I move out, and the children seem unhappy with me. When they come to my apartment, they wonder why they don't have as much freedom in my place, why they can't run across the floor or hurtle from couch to couch. They mention how kind their mother's new fiancé, then husband, is. At her house, they have electronics I can't afford and easier access to friends I lost in the shuffle. My small apartment of hand-me-down bookshelves look precarious, the futons college dorm-esque. I try to make them happy with crayons and paper, little journals with cookies on the cover, but they lose interest quickly, and complain about not being at home. I date for a while, but decide it isn't for me. The children are so young, and I don't know enough about myself yet. Perhaps never have. At night, I lie with them in my small bed and read them stories as my mother did with me. I want them to understand that I love them as the boy loved the Velveteen Rabbit. But sometimes they play, smack one another, or argue over who gets to be close to me. I wind up shouting at times, sending them to bed early. Then I sit in the living room, alone and sad. Other nights they listen as angels, and I want to tuck myself into the covers forever, to be buried in the quicksand of the moment. I buy a small tent at Walmart and try to set up camp in the small yard, but my landlord sees me, pulls me aside, and says it's not allowed. I plead with her for a while, my anger rising, but she says it's a liability. As the children sleep, I look out the window at the phosphorescent light falling on the streets below, and I feel immense loneliness descend, and wonder if my life was supposed to be this way. Then I head back to my small room, gently lift my son to one side of the bed, and drift into a dreamless sleep. In this version of the story, I move out, and the kids seem mostly okay. I'm dating someone new who often thinks of the children, sends articles about their emotional well-being and growth. The children seem confused sometimes by her youth, by the way she reminds them to use their forks, clean up their messes, to wash their hands after having put fingers in their noses. We camp out in the small yard, make s'mores, briefly argue over what time the kids should sleep. When they finally do, we slip back into the apartment and have ferociously quiet sex. The moths gather light on the porch, and we slip back into the tent, lie close together, warm bodies, warm night. We shuttle the kids back and forth to my ex, who seems sad with this arrangement, the quip and typical moving on with a younger woman. Sometimes we fight about it, the way we're trying to structure this new family. We stay up for hours, texting in the dark. In this version of the story, I stay, and everyone seems moderately fine. In this version of the story, no one leaves. The children do not go away to college. We live in a large house out in the country with a small vineyard, wily farm cats, chickens, and a pair of anxious dogs who bark at everyone and then looked pleased with themselves. My mother lives with her mother and us as well, along with her grandparents and mine. The children are multiplying now, as children are wont to do. We take walks down the road where a line of oaks bends towards one another. At night, we watch Miyazaki movies that remind us of all the childhoods we lost in the grip of adult life. We try to construct a cat bus from cardboard boxes. We get a bit drunk with all the relatives, shoo the children away with wine glasses. Years pass and we continue to grow closer together. Sometimes we'll notice that one of the family members is missing, but we'll find they've just merged, turning two into one. We watch the birds fly overhead, wait for a moment to come. We grow closer and closer together, no one ever leaving, until we are as tight and dense as the universe before the Big Bang, before any of these worlds were at all possible, just dreams in the imagination of the universe to come.
Hello, I'm Laura Romeyn, and I'll be reading my poem, The Gardener. The day his brother died, he strung up the yard. From every tree, a glass bottle emptied and hung upside down. Bucket lids stapled to branches, propellers from clotheslines, a bicycle pieced apart from its frame. From inside the house at night, the voice of a man singing both parts of the song. During the day, he watered the yard with soft drink 2 liters. He'd painted faces directly onto the plastic, poked holes under each watercolored eye. Pop bottle crybabies, he called them, petting them, feeding the lawn with their water can tears. Some people passed by the red brick house in the rundown lot. They took a look and moved on, or asked what he was up to from the other side of the fence. Others threw cans or metal trash onto his grass. He scooped it all up gratefully, got to work. All that came his way was given second life in low-wheeling light, and by another pair of hands, too, I would like to think.
Hi, I'm Samantha Schnell, and I'm really excited to be in the Witness Second Chances issue. And I'm going to be reading my poem called First Banana, which is dedicated to Georgia, who is enjoying a banana as we speak. This is what the poem looks like on the page. First banana. Georgia didn't like the banana as much as I wanted her to. I had my camera ready for her first bite, but she liked the silicone spoon more than the sweet slime it carried, so I finished the mashed up banana myself. When she was inside of me, I remember, I didn't like bananas either, or chickpeas, or oatmeal, or sustainably farmed salmon, or any salmon, or even water, or kisses. Nor did I like waking up, because of all the throwing up. I was so hyper-emetic, they called it, that I closed my mouth to bananas and the world. Georgia puts the whole world in her mouth. What does she like if not bananas? She likes, or maybe loves, her long-toed feet and other people's glasses, and lint on the floor, and the way the tail moves on our small black dog, and hearing her own self shriek to the high heavens, and propelling her limbs in my lap like a hyperkinetic octopus while I try to type out a poem. Did you know, Georgia, I would grow 6 more arms if I could, just to hold your little body tighter? Because sometimes life swoops in with sharp talons, looking for tender prey. Thanks so much for listening.
I am going to be reading an excerpt from my essay called We Are Not Old, but We Are Having Some Realizations. Where is your nut graph, aka the meat of the article? How does a nut have meat if nuts are vegan? Is a nut graph referring to like a man's nuts, like balls, keeper of the seed of life, the sperm? Why is it always all about the sperm and the meat and the nuts, but never the eggs? When you were a journalist, your mostly dude editors were always like, where is your nut graph, Jen Saul? Okay, fine. Maybe it's called a nut graph because it's a paragraph that contains the point of the story, gives a little context and reasons why the reader should care in a nutshell. But you're not giving anyone a nutballs graph now. One advantage of aging is giving less of an F. So freeing. That's the topic, aging. Now you need a hook to trick people into reading the rest of the article. How about an attention-grabbing anecdote? So, pre-COVID, remember that? Me neither. Pre-COVID, we would be at a playdate turned dinner party at a friend's house. We'd all be crowded into a wooden house with lots of shag carpeting and kids racing down the stairs and laughing. We'd reach that point in the evening when everyone's tired from the Pinot and the whining and the week, and they start complaining about everything. And one of the parents, still pretty fit from biking, this dad, says, "Man, my back hurts. I tried to pick him up and I just threw it out." And your back also hurts. And you remember how your dad's back hurt for your entire childhood, it felt like. And he'd lie on the sofa for way too long. Your home had like 3 heating pads and a hot water bottle and giant bottles of extra strength Tylenol. And now you realize why. Your dad was picking you up your whole life. You and your sister, who used to say in this tiny whine, pick me up, until he did it. And she was only the second of 4 kids, and each of you is about 6 feet or taller now, except the runt Sarah, who is only 5'8". So, how old was Dad when his back went out regularly? If he had his first kid at 27, 35 at the latest, right? And then another parent, a mom who still has Kardashian thick hair, she'll say, yeah, my back is messed up. We are old. You hear this a lot. We are old. It happens at every gathering. We are old, someone says. We old. You always yell back, I am 48. That is not old. Stop saying that, or else you will feel old and your body will listen and age faster. Equals main idea equals nut graph. Stop saying we're old. We aren't old. But we might be a little tired. We might be having some realizations. Like some middle-aged sort of realizations that the whole wine-melatonin combination you've been using to address a great sleep deficit along with COVID stress, well, it's not sustainable. You actually need sleep, real sleep, 8 hours, non-negotiable. That's just kind of how your body works. You've also started drinking water all day long because hydration equals maturity. But you are still so very tired. Maybe that's why when you finally saw your mom friends after lockdown with vaccinations and without masks, all of you were kind of unrecognizable, transformed, fully white or gray hair, or at least a shock of white somewhere. Not much makeup, perhaps a bit heavier or thinner, with additional wrinkles, split ends, etc. Not that it matters, but yet another realization: your sleep should probably be drug herb-free sleep too, especially if you want it to slow the aging process. But you've already built up a tolerance to melatonin and a tolerance to all the PM formula drugs for sleeping, and you briefly became addicted to Theraflu because the sleep was so good. In the before times, you also tried legal marijuana for stress/sleep, but unfortunately you vaped THC one time before people started being hospitalized and even dying from e-cigarette and vaping-associated lung injuries somehow linked to the vitamin E, maybe? And did you imagine it for 1 second? Your lungs started feeling like they did back when you socially smoked actual cigarettes, Camel Lights or American Spirits for your health. Back then, you had to climb the 3 floors to your San Francisco walk-up, and by the time you got to the top, you were very aware that you were feeling your actual lungs working hard. It was only 1 vape pen, 2 max, but now you wonder if that did something to your lungs. Well, plus all the socially smoked cigarettes in your 20s. But at least you're not dead. Or old. TK. Insert research on recent vaping product-associated deaths to build trust with the reader / show them that it's not just a memoir. You'll convince them that it's a research-based article. That's what magazines like. TK is a trick you learned as a reporter. TK means that you'll add it later because you can't think of anything good right now, especially since one of your kids is screaming in a sing-song voice while sitting on the toilet, "Mommy, wipe me," because they just learned about rhyming somehow despite all the learning lost from lockdown when you were homeschooling them while also trying to grade papers and attend all of the last-minute Zoom meetings of that chaotic semester. But the kids rhyming is surely a parenting win. Before submitting this essay anywhere, you will run spell check, and spell check will catch the TK to remind you that you're still not done. TK means you will think of such a good piece of evidence to add later that you'll be like, what if I die of a breakthrough COVID variant without being able to top that effing awesome example? Thank you.
Lisai, for Gwendolyn Nivens. I feel you protecting yourself insistently, and I bless it. Okay, we are 2 submarines, eternally vigilant, but safe enough to surface to periscope depth. The answer is the Queen of Swords. The answer is burning silk smells like massacres. On the face of dawn, my chest is all springtime nerves. I was measuring the questions themselves in these really strange ways cut off from feeling. The long numbness of the autopilot face versus my warm hands terrible with helplessness. Describe what you're not, the absence that limits you. What was your role in the puzzle? I told myself rather than kill myself, I'd vanish into another place, another self. He spent the last 20 years of his life trying to make an entirely automated person because rubber had been invented and could resemble human blood vessels. He spent 20 years on that and failed. She can't solve this by being cute. The question was not would it harm her, but how much was she willing to gamble on certain types of harm. It made her feel like the softest person. I misread safest. That porosity is resonant with you because you're like that in deeply unsafe circumstances, observing and adoring and getting stuck in linear time. The white jet of water from the stone lion's mouth holds fast against the night's bruised cloud. I think you should write a biography of your mom because she and the world deserve it, to know how to survive deliberate negligence and fires. Maple syrup gets in your beard. You play the 8 of trees and heave le sigh. Why did I ever do that masculine thing? I'm done trying to be brave. If you hurt me, I will scream. I need a different image of the heart.
Hi, my name is Greg Tebbano, and I'm reading from my short story, Discounted. When I was alive, my brain organized everything into two categories, work and respite. As I got older, the amount of respite dwindled. Had my life gotten busier, or had I just become more curmudgeonly with age? Work was work, of course, but so was driving to work, and mowing, and shoveling. Eventually making dinner was work, and even Emma, who carried my heart away each day in a lunch bag, even Emma became work. And by the time we got Jack, well, Jack was work. I forswore sleep for 8 months, and instead carried him around in the dark, whispering the names of hockey players I remembered from the 80s. Marc Messier would love it if you got some sleep, pal. Big game tomorrow, Jack. Let's not keep Grant Fuhr up all night. When Emma was 35, her desire to have a child singed the linoleum in our kitchen, her bare toes leaving little cigarette burns any place she lingered for too long. My feet, by contrast, remained cold. Jack awed me and terrified me, and was the only life force on earth that could pry open my smile after a 10-hour day at the store. But did I want this? I began to despair. If I couldn't find the light of work and fatherhood, I knew I wouldn't find it anywhere. I worked at the store for 15 years, starting as a stock boy, a schlepper of grains and beans, a register clerk, and finally a buyer, calling from wholesale catalogs and then the internet all the miscellany America demanded. I loved the store the way you love an ex, reluctantly, dramatically, and too much. I made a living there, and as a big and final thank you, it took my life. Emma knew my wish to be cremated. I keep waiting for her to come in with my ashes and sift them around the aisles, in the walk-in fridge and freezer, where fans will pull them into the HVAC and out a blower on the roof. Eventually, there's a little shrine, a framed photo of me holding Jack astride a display of clearance candy. Licorice, honey sticks, a rack of foiled truffles. I have Duncan, the store's owner, to thank for its placement. Even in death, I am monetized. Sometimes I spy my coworkers hugging by the memorial, against regulations. I've seen my manager, Tara Beth, lay a hand on the photo in the dark hours before the public is allowed. She touches the frame as though it has give, as one might a human cheek. A regular may stroll in, his eyes a puzzle above a mask he can't bother to hike up over his nose. He points at my picture. "This guy died?" he says. No one answers him, but he steps back, looks around. They have a knack for looking straight in my direction, though it's too much to say they see me, just as in life. At the shrine, people toss folded messages into a ceramic cup. Unless I read over their shoulders as the notes are composed, none of this communication reaches me. Once Tara Beth wrote, "I bet you still make more than me, you little leech," before crumpling it up and flicking it in with the others. I wonder what will happen when the cup is full. Will its contents be burned in a ceremony outside? Will it merely be tossed into the recycling? I hope for the latter, for this trans-dimensional correspondence to sift free when the county waste truck heaves up the dumpster and shakes the shit out of it. I want a wind to scatter the messages, for jays to carry them up to the high boughs and weave them with twine, with hay, with human hair, into their nests. When the virus reached our city, I worked at the store through the first brimstone flurries of the apocalypse. I didn't recognize customers I'd known for years. Terror turned them selfish, stretched the skin tight over the sockets of their skulls. They knew death could follow them home from here and might be watching the next time they opened the fridge, his eyes hidden in a jar of black olives. I told Emma what I saw. She shook her head. When you didn't believe in humanity, there wasn't much you wouldn't believe. For a time, grocery workers were held up as heroes. Briefly, we were as important as firefighters. It felt cowardly to quit. Also, it was financially impossible. In another week, Emma got laid off, Jack's daycare closed, and my life had sudden, intrinsic meaning. My job became my calling, my duty, and as difficult as it was, that feeling never left me. Our weekly shipments became enormous, and I felt at 40, the encroaching limits of my body. Some days I was elated to be there, a mule for my community. Other days I hated everyone. It was too much to wade through the customers' outrageous expectations, their personal anxieties which collected in a rolling fog and remained long after they had left. After 6 months, the stress started to break me. I became unfamiliar to myself. I would sit in my car in the back alley, stare at the employee entrance, and whisper to myself, I can't go in there. I can't go back in there. It must have been how soldiers felt, at times proud, at others used, always wondering if when their blood painted the sand, it would be a donation or a waste.
This one's called Lattice After Your Advice. If I eat the window in this room, I wonder what I'll be greeted by. Sometimes I'm waiting for a Christian mystic to write a blurb on my back comparing me to Heraclitus. Sometimes I'm waiting for a hedgehog to materialize in my document. A person flickers between being a dramatic effect and an organic thing. She said her grandson was named Revelation. Revelation is 5 years old, he sure is something. And the other woman said I wouldn't go that far. You'd better do your thing because the individual is always mistaken. His brother's name was Sam. Jean Cocteau basically said every city is Santa Fe and every day is Thursday. The secret of our century is the difference that I put my faith in you existing is. This is the dense bedroom from whose democracy I will never recover. Santa Fe on a Thursday is just gossip out to bereave us of our infinitude. The word mast immediately prompts deja vu, especially if you're capsizing, but perhaps also if you recall those small childhood piracies. My retired godmother wants to be an operator for a funeral home. You want to be a retired godmother. I want dusk to be my godmother and the dawn to be an unoperated funeral home, or the other way around. There are at least 200,000 feelings. There's someone who can handle this kind of thing. There are eyes under your bags. A hedgehog materializes and tells me nature is actually a historical social category. Don't ask me if I know how much you love me while I'm counting these beans. I will lose count. When oblique Saturn sat in the house of agonies, he decided subjectivity had to hurt a lot. You dream of a psychoanalytic game show where you and your family can work through your issues as a team and win a new Subaru. Then you're on a beach with jumping fish. I agree thoughts are winged, but because of that, they will die on vacation. God gave you a gift and I want it. I can only describe this want by describing its opposite, which is the secret of our century. When sheets will be unhinged from all the books, they will make circles of coasts impossible to hear. In the enemy, there will be nothing wrong. The hummingbird and the trumpet vine that keeps the rogue eyed with personal witness, or the other way around. If you can't get home for supper, you might just have to starve. I kept a potato in my pocket this entire time, which should count for something. A potato is a passport of an infinite settlement. The opera of its personal word is like the supermarket alcohol tides we live near, frozen in the moonlight's frozen allegation. Actually, a populace flows through each clause. I had deferred to the measurement of believers and have since chosen the mechanism of bells, which announce a center that is nowhere and a circumference that is everywhere. But discourse is usage. When you speak, I disappear. Thank you.
Hello, Witness. My name is Colleen Mayo. Thank you for publishing me in your Second Chances issue, and thanks so much to all the folks involved in the issue and in the virtual launch and the in-person launch. Thanks for including me virtually. I'm going to be reading the first page of my story, Redaction. We lived willingly in the ditch. There were other options. The complex where I eventually moved and now live with Jewel. Or, had my life taken a more magical course, I might have ended up in the subdivisions beyond the complex, where rows of pastel homes nestled like cozy eggs next to each other. None of us living in the ditch had ever been inside of one of those candy-colored houses, but we knew they had plump little children inside who watched television and stuck fingers up their noses, little sloths of comfort. Lately, in my drunker and more forlorn moments, I imagine Jewel ends up like this. Some state administrator's chinless 14-year-old with shiny hair, no curiosity about the existence of books, no dirt or whisper of wind in the creases of her elbows. Sometimes I imagine Jewel will find her way into the ditch. Sometimes I imagine Ira, who is dead, still lives there. I see him crouched around the circle of gray-haired women, telling his sexy stories, spinning his bullshit. These thoughts come to me late at night in the complex, after I've put Jewel to bed and am feeling sick with wine in the past. It's then that I remember how the ditch held us like a womb at night, our bodies slick as wet leaves. I see us waking each morning at dawn, anointed, oiled in sunlight. It was freedom, or the closest to freedom we believed could ever exist after the complexes took over. Ira and I were similar that way, equally pathetic. We'd convinced ourselves of something noble when all we really did was live outside in a ditch. Thank you.
Thank you, Witness Magazine, for having me. Thank you, Nabila Lovelace, for choosing my poem as a runner-up to David Moolten's poem, Locomotive. My name is Kelly Gray, and I'll be reading my poem titled, "The Problem I Am Having is that Dying Can Be So Loud, with Death So Quiet." 1. The forest has held its mushrooms back all season. We go digging, insisting with baskets and knives that curve. When I start to cry, it is not for sorrow, but for lack of time. I see the buck across the clearing, and he steps towards me, a hostile quiver of beast. The doe behind him will not look at me. I imagine her apologies for his sense of possession. I am only crying into the understory of the forest. I don't even want to take the mushrooms home. 2. I remember the softness of butter and my daughter's body against headboard with seizure. The doctor said, "Do you have a history of sleepwalking?" I could never stay in a bed. Every night my lullaby is sung cliffside with a jump. I am horror queen, slumber show. I dream of finding my child dead twice before dawn. 3. I drag our bodies to this forest, show her the place where needles have risen to make way for blossom death fruit that we bring home cut up. I lick the black of skillet, and still she refuses to eat this medicine. 4. The buck knew we were thieves. It is true, I would swallow his favorite doe if I could, force him to take me as bride, the four-hooved whore of the underworld. Anything to become this forest and leave her shaking bed behind. 5. I chew doe leg as he takes my face into his hooves, croons ancient deer song from his mouth made of velvet gums and grass teeth. My bride, beeth my possession, close your eyes against motherhood. I grow 1,000 teats, then the fawns come. Each one I love, each one has a neck shaped like the inside of a cougar's mouth. I stand dripping milk as the buck bellows. Mushrooms push up beneath my furred belly, the bleeding of my children, my ungulated ache. 6. I dress my daughter as fawn, a veil across her ears, slow blinking eyes. She practices prancing, sniffing a tree. I collect urine in jars, circle our home with scent. A hunter comes. I leave a poisoned sparrow in his path, hand my daughter sugar candies in the shape of fallen maple leaves. The hunter wants to see my breasts. I wrap them and wrap them until I am flat, a place for my child to walk. I gather small arrows from the breastbones of birds and tell her about war and neurology. She listens, and at night, she does not leave me.
Many, many heartfelt thanks to Nabila Lovelace for picking my poem, Locomotive, as the winner of the Literary Award in Poetry, and to Witness for publishing it. Locomotive. His mother framed his portrait of one, a sideways obelisk on wheels with a yellow line for light, a monstrous monument to her, which since she saved it, so must he, like proof in case he ever doubts he's special. And like every mogul, despot, and scamp in the world, once dangled their feet while they crayoned at a table, now that she's gone, he can get away with a massacre, a bank job, kissing a man. Naturally, he feels terrible about his sense of relief, and the violence of this back and forth wells up to mechanical advantage like steam. His life, in other words, continues to be like history's motionless journey, a train of big or weak or simply laden moments, muffled as by a snowbound field or a wall in their first house, the room where he'd drift off alone, comforted by a clanky radiator. She was right now and then, like an antique clock whose reassuring hands never strayed from 1:45. I'm sorry, he tells his lovers, but really himself. I'm sorry, rhythmic as the miles on the way to some dark, unpeopled place, a country where love is less a dream than a superstition, a living thing inside the engine.